the rhetorical use of etymology. All right? It means choosing words based on their origin and the resulting connotation. It's neat. It's just neat and pretty interesting because it's smart. It's a helpful trick to witness in good writing. All right, you can see it all over good writing. And it's also useful in one's own writing because, you know, if you're thoughtful about it, you can choose words and determine how they impact the listener just based on their genealogy, where they came from. Kind of interesting, right? But it's also neat because it shows off that a reliance on simpler words for holding big ideas, that can be an effective choice, a smart rhetorical choice. And all of the video's examples, I mean, this video was inspired by a video about rhetorical etymology, and I will link it in the description. But I think all of this speaks to a vector in a difference in my taste and lots of other literary criticism and their taste. I like seeing fat, simple diction summarize big ideas because it holds a kind of generosity. I mean, I think that it's a voice of generosity that does this, and gravity. All right, this is Churchill and the King James version of the Bible, and Richard Feynman, the physicist. They all seem to care about me, the listener. I mean, little old humble me. Big ideas, but they're all for me. And they adjust their words to help me understand what they are trying to say, right? They're delivering the idea, but they're really concerned about it getting there on time and well, right? All in one piece. Pinker and Orwell, Steven Pinker and Orwell, and many others, like this idea of plain speak and prose so much that they say it's a golden rule, all right, of all writing, that people should be trying to do this simple thing. But is there a counterpoint? Is there a counter case? Can we undo this? All right. I mean, one counterpoint that comes to mind is English's poetic avant-garde, which is full of bilingual Roman Saxon playfulness. All right. General translingual intrigue. I mean, syntax has got to have multiple purposes. Its plainer purpose of prose, delivering an idea, is served certainly by Saxon simplicity. All right. Definitely. And Robert Frost's essay on sentence sounds is a good piece on poetics and clarity. That poetics and the sound of certain verbs or words in general can deliver meaning, even better than just sort of technical speech or plain, unthoughtful, poor sounding speech. And for Pinker, Steven Pinker, naive realism and the omission of needless words and nouns and verbs and all of this. A linguist first, Pinker, always a linguist first. Look, he's particularly savvy at pointing out the ineffective or parochial self-consciousness of all kinds of professional language in this book, Sense of Style. Like academies and lawyer gibberish and why those are so confusing to read. And also like why they're so confusing to read. Like technically why are they bad, but also why are they bad? What are they trying to hide or cover up or, confuse, right? I think it's funny and insightful. But Pinker doesn't even touch on the subversion of his rules very much, or speak to the possibility that confounding syntax could be used for literary effect. Why not? I mean, in great literature that we've talked about, and recently, frankly, writers have used clear grammar and obtuse grammar. All right, they've used simple words and really complex words, jargon, each at different times and for different ends. I would say. All right, sometimes even they've placed a complex idea right next to a simple idea as a juxtaposition. All right, to contrast the two. And frankly, they've scored a literary win-win, all right? Because when an author does that, a simple idea and a complex idea right together, they're proving very quickly, very elegantly, they are able to write in a complicated way. But also, they're promising they are not so stuffy or snooty or high and mighty or highfalutin, all right? They're not so above the reader that they are showing off, which earns them this like coolness, this devil may care. Look, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this and that. I'm a normal person, but also I'm very sophisticated. All right, coolness, banana. All right, and so the work doesn't become profane. It sort of warrants it's a close reading, a sophisticated reading, and it lets the reader know, hey, you're in on the joke, right? I appreciate this, but I appreciate it a little bit less than I once did. All right. David Foster Wallace is kind of a king of this style, and his essay on the authority and American usage, well, not the authority, authority and American usage, all right? The essay in premise is a review of a dictionary about English usage, all right? But here's the thing. DFW talks about coolness and snootiness while performing it, all right? While doing the complex next to simple, all the way through the essay. It's very fun to watch him do this. It's a great read if you're at all interested in this topic because he covers so much technical ground about usage and authority and dictionaries and the histories there, but he makes it very hip and cool and like the reader is in on it and very relevant for the reader, right? He talks about how he owes that to the reader, and in dictionaries kind of owe the same way. But this coolness makes the work, I mean, really smart, okay, yes, but always a little bit self-conscious, I think I would say. Like, you can always tell they tried hard to look like they woke up like this, you know? We notice this about even like Nietzsche, all right, a twinge of adolescent self-conscious overcompensation happening in all of his proclamations about how deep and how right he is, how silly and blind the other geniuses are. And there's a lot of, hand-wavy Nietzschean seriousness, all right? But he's also very deft and can put together a quip and a scathing criticism and a, sarcastic little nip, all of that. But there's also a little element of where he's taking himself very seriously and he's a little bit self-conscious about it. And I think this is a trait that the philosophers Nietzsche criticized are totally, it's a sin that they haven't committed. Plato, for instance. Plato doesn't succumb to the grammatical snags of self-doubt or even have to decree his own relevance for years to come. Instead, what he utilizes is a dialogue format to argue against himself, all right? Now, rhetorically, this is genius. Absolute genius. Because at any given sentence, at any given grammatical, syntactical unit, he can just say the meant thing plainly, chest out. But if he has a character that he doesn't agree with say it, he can still say the thing really well and then go on to contradict it. He doesn't have to hedge mid-sentence or mid-paragraph even, all right? He's thinking in a sophisticated manner and showing that off, but everything is being said is very clear and you're able to understand it, right? I think Plato was thinking like a literary author. That's not news or whatever, but you can see that. Like he's dissecting an idea by pairing characters and choosing what they say and in what context and in what sequence. Right? This is a novel. This is Dostoevsky. It's stuffing big ideas into people in very particular instances, in very particular contexts, and seeing what happens. And then the reader is compelled because they're interested in the people maybe, but they're also very interested in how the ideas are combating with each other, right? And like, if we take as a premise the purpose of syntax, which is the communication of an idea, the delivery of an idea, simple, and insist that every instance of syntax, being like a sentence, like every sentence, should serve the greater purpose of their form, right? So a sentence is beholden to the idea that should be clear and deliver with clear prose the idea, all right? And that a sentence in some objective way could be made better or worse in that, spectrum of clarity. And we could even caveat, rarely we may subvert that rule for a particular rhetorical end. You could represent the voice of a confused person or confused narrator and make the prose confusing, but that's the same kind of just meta adherence of the principle, right? Basically we're trying to convey that this narrator is confused to the audience, but instead of saying that clearly, we make it very clear using a metatextual, means. So it's kind of the same end. Look, this is all supposing that we have to use people doing things to objects in places. And grammatically, that is nouns and verbs and objects and prepositions, all right? That is the makeup of a sentence, and that's how we see the world, and it's also how we deliver an idea clearly. And what steps in the way of that is abstraction and zombie nouns and the passive voice and all of that, jargonification and bad vocabulary and snootiness smears up the underlying grammar and the structure underneath it, and it makes understanding more and more difficult. All right? Literature, similarly, on a grander scale, is in the business of using characters in scenes, which are places, and the characters are taking actions against objects in a very particular time and context, nothing in the abstract. And that literature it's doing the work of a good sentence, all right? But if you reject literature or the, narrative and you reject grammar or syntax, all of a sudden you have a bigger bill at the end of your meal. All right. All of a sudden, it's not impossible. It's not impossible to do this and pull it off. But, what you're making is interesting. It's just also kind of lame. And it's like, you're rubbing against the very essence of the thing that you're doing, which is dangerous territory. You can't get away with much. You can't get away with some things. You can't get away with much. All right. And on top of that, if you try to get meta in your work, I, at least, start to smell the self-consciousness bubbling up, all right? A self-consciousness that may be sublimated and extreme, all right, in a lot of postmodern work, all right? And we've talked about postmodernism before, and postmodern work shines technically in just this juxtaposition between the profane and the technical, right? The simple and the complex, and the showing of many, many concentric systems, and the revelation of that for the reader, and usually the employment of metatextual elements to sort of hypnotize the reader into understanding that premise. But somehow, the greats, I would say, even escape the conceit of metatextual awareness, all right? And the greats are rather blissfully in and of themselves, with directness, with a flow. Whether the author is premeditating or not, on the page is just what's on the page. The Tao Te Ching doesn't fuss with its place in literary criticism, all right? The Bible doesn't ask questions about itself. I mean, the Bible's complicated, but look, you get the idea. And this whole topic makes my stomach sick because the thing that I can't get, a hold of in my writing is the sincerity part, is the simplicity part, the flow state. It's the not relying on self-conscious to show you're smart, and the not relying on bloated, hedge-loving, compensational gobbledygook. What I want to say is just that I should be saying what I want to say. That's the extent of it, Slapping it out there sincerely. Well, that can be the most sophisticated, the most genius rhetorical position to take. And, the most generous kind of voice and the most sophisticated kind of writing does exactly that, which is confounding because it's just confusing. So anyways, those are my thoughts. Go check out the video below for more of it, but that's what I'm thinking.